Hello, I am Gepwin and I'm here with Kerbal Space Program. So last episode, I discovered that I did not get enough science to unlock any of the things that I wanted to unlock. Not surprising since all I did was send a rocket to the Kerbal Lowlands, which wasn't terribly exciting. So, this episode I'm sending a rocket back to the moon because there is so much on the moon we have not yet done. The moon also has biomes, so does Minimus, but I think going back to the moon will be more interesting because I want to go to Minimus in the next mission of this episode. So, I built myself a new carrier. Excuse me. I built myself a new launcher with some of the new parts because I unlocked the larger fuel containers. Now I'm only using those in the middle. It gives me a nice wide base for the lander, and it gives me plenty of fuel to get up to the moon. Or min. Mun. There we go. Words. Anyway, all kinds of boosters on the side. I'm asparagus staging this thing because I did unlock the fuel lines finally, and asparagus staging does get you just that little extra bit of delta V out of your rocket that I really like to have. I don't know, some people argue that it's not really good, but I like the asparagus staging. It makes the rocket launches more interesting. Anyway, you'll notice that that large tank in the middle has all the side tanks feeding into it with a large efficient engine on the inside, so that's what's going to be our main interplanetary stage. Not really interplanetary, you know what I mean. It's the stage that's going to get us from Kerbal orbit into moon orbit. Other than that, there are 3 small probes on this thing. Again, I am not sending this to the moon just to land on the moon. That's just boring. Why would you do that? One-purpose spaceship. So, I'm sending this to the moon with 3 small probes that we're going to put into orbit and scan for kethane. Unfortunately, you can't really scan with 3 probes at once the way that the mod is set up, but I think it's cool looking. You know, why send 1 probe when you can send 3? And it helps with the symmetry. So we have Jebediah back. I'm not sure what happened to him in the last episode, but he's back with us now. He's flying this thing, getting the final staging going. This was a really kind of pitch-perfect launch. I think I'm getting better at this. I have not yet gotten, for those wondering, I have not yet gotten any of the mech jibs that let me do auto launches or auto landings. Right now I'm using them to get into orbit and to transfer to the moon, because these are things that I have done many times before and I find it dull. So, finally getting up into our orbit and finishing our circularization burn. Am using mech jab, because like I said, I find planning all the circularization burns and things dull. And I've done it a million times before. So you will notice that we have a ton of fuel left. This is what's going to get us to the moon. Moon, I'm going to just say moon. Moon is so hard to say. I mean, it does sound nice. I like that they're not the same names, but oh, it's so hard to say with the weird U sound in there. Just try saying it so much, it's not good. Anyway, we circularize. And now we're going to just set the moon as our target and do a very simple Hohmann transfer. The moon has a very nice, convenient launch window, which was kind of dull, so we're going to switch straight to circularizing back around the moon. We fire at our closest approach to take full advantage of that O-berth effect. The faster your rocket is moving, the more efficient your engines are. That's the basis of it. So always fire your circularization and things when you are as close to the object you're trying to get to as possible. Now we're going to mess around with these things for a bit, because I can't click on the right thing. Yeah, can't jettison. There we go. Decouple all of these probes and leave them in orbit. We're going to go deal with them later. First, I want to land my rocket. And now the plan was to have this fuel be used up and to use the top stage to land on the moon. But we had so much fuel left in that main tank, I decided to just bring it with. You know, worst case, I can ditch it close to the surface. And best case, I can just land on my tail, which really tests how good I've gotten at landings. So we're going to come down right on that crater ridge, so I'm going to fire straight up. This engine is pretty powerful, so it's lifting the rocket and slowing it down pretty easily, but I want to fire up and to the side so that we don't land on that big crater ridge. I decided to go over toward the left, left from this perspective anyway. Decided to head over that way, away from the crater. I could have landed inside the crater, but this seemed like a closer path, and I don't know. I didn't feel like messing around with a crater landing. I wanted to try to get a different biome. I landed inside of a crater last time. So I used to be terrible at landings. I used to avoid these things ever. That's why I started using mech jab in my first game, because I was so bad at the landings. And now look at this. I can put down very easily on the moon surface and land perfectly on my engine, which is one of the harder things to do, actually. Because landing gear gives you, not that much, but some of the landing gear gives you up to like 5 meters per second that it can withstand impact. Engines, not so much, so being able to put down right on your engine and keep it balanced is pretty nice, even on a low gravity thing. Now, I certainly don't think I could do this on something like Duna. And there it is, our custom flag on the moon. I did skip our weird little moon excursion. As fun as it is to watch Jeb flail around, it's certainly not the most entertaining, so. Now, we did some science on the moon, and just in case, because I'm not confident with this thing landing in water. It doesn't have as many parachutes on it as some other things, so I'm going to collect all of the scientific data from these experiments. Since this engine makes a nice little platform for Jeb to run around on, he can get close to all the experiments, collect all of the scientific data, and then store that in the command pod. So even if the ship itself has a hard landing, we're going to be able to get our science back from the command pod once we get back to Kerbin. So, really quickly, we're just going to take off more or less straight up. Getting back from the moon it's a little finicky, but it's not that difficult, especially when you have this huge amount of surplus fuel. I don't really need to worry about my directions or anything. I can just burn up, circularize, and then head back to Kerbin from there. I wish these trash trucks would stop going by. I'm sorry, there's trash trucks. I do apologize for all the trash trucks. I don't know why there's so many coming down the street. Anyway, going up, we ditched this the larger bit of fuel. Even though there's still some fuel left in there, I wanted to ditch it before we headed back. Just gives the spaceship a nicer line. It'll be easier to land once we get there, and also it will. Now the junk will just slam into the moon's surface instead of orbiting Kerbin endlessly. I'm not too worried about space debris, but it's always nice to clean up after yourself a little bit. So after quickly circularizing around the moon, we're going to burn backward in relation to the moon's orbit in order to get our periaps down over Kerbin. I did do a slight bit of aero braking on this one just to practice and to get around, but that's really boring. I had to go around the planet 4 or 5 times, so this is the final approach here. You get a nice little light show heading through the atmosphere on our way down to the planet's surface. Unfortunately, I did come down on the night side. I was trying to avoid that. I was really trying to pick my landing spot since I had so much fuel, but I grazed too close to the atmosphere at one point, and just landing was unavoidable after that. So we're just going to watch a nice little light show as we enter the atmosphere. This is flash heating. There's actually a very interesting misconception I just heard about this heating effect that you get on spacecraft and things. Everyone tells you that it is air friction. That is the friction of an object moving very, very quickly through the atmosphere that's heating up the air around it. Now, I recently heard some research that said that that's not entirely true, because other objects can move about that fast in the atmosphere without creating that much heating. And the fact is that it's actually the spaceship compressing the air in front of it. Since it's coming in from space into dense atmosphere at such a huge speed with such a relatively large surface area, it's actually compressing the air in front of it, and compressing things heats it up just as much, if not more, than friction does. So firing our engines, I really like to use up the last of my fuel sometimes right before I open my parachutes. I do need to look up when parachutes break, but I like to keep it under 200 meters a second before I open them up, and make sure that they don't open at too high a speed so that they don't rip my spaceship in half, because I've had that happen several times. This craft fortunately did not rip itself in half, and we're firing slightly as we get down toward the ocean, because ocean is terrible to land on in this game, and all of my landings have been on the ocean. I really need to start being able to pick my landing spots. But we can recover our vessel and get our science, and this should be more than enough science for us to unlock all the parts we need going forward, and we can finally set up some of that kethane mining. So yes, over 300 science on that mission. We now have over 500 science, which is more than enough to unlock all the parts we need, like the docking bays and RCS, etc., etc., better landing gear. Now, before we forget, let's go back to our moon probes. I've already put 2 of them into 90-degree orbits going over. I want to kind of have them crisscross over the surface. Even though I can't have all of them on at once, it looks cooler. Also, I discovered that I forgot to put batteries on these, which makes them functionally useless as kethane detectors, because the detector takes up so much power. The solar panels just can't keep up with it at this stage. I really need to unlock the larger solar panels, which is definitely on my to-do list, and hopefully we'll get more science soon after all these missions that will allow me to unlock the larger solar panels and the bigger engines, because right now I'm still working with all of the small engines. I haven't unlocked any of the large engines except for the smallest kind of landing style engine. But we now are detecting kethane on the moon. I don't think I'm going to set up a mining operation on the moon itself, but here is our miner that we are now sending to Minimus. It's a very simple design. The middle of the craft is the mine, is the miner with fuel on top. The thing on the very, very top is a space probe that I'm going to try to use to fuel, to ferry some fuel up and down into orbit. I may have to replace it with a larger model later on, but that is what is so great about docking ports. You can do whatever. You can replace things with whatever you want. So sending it up into space is relatively easy. We've got boosters on the side to help along the initial thing, and you'll notice that the outermost stage just has that teeny bit of extra fuel that's just enough extra delta V to get us all the way up into orbit without having to use the center fuel. The center fuel is partially transfer stage and mostly landing, but the great thing is that I do not have to worry at all about how much fuel this thing uses up getting to the surface of Minimus, because it is going to make fuel once it's there. So this is actually a relatively boring launch as they go. Again, asparagus staging and making it all the way up into a circularization with quite a bit of our fuel left. We still are on our last stage here. This is the last stage before we get to those top engines that we're going to use for our landing. We do use those up in the transfer next up, but really this thing got to Minimus with a huge amount of fuel, I think because it has the large tank in the middle. Now circularizing over the planet's surface, we previously sent a space probe to Minimus to scan out places to land, and we did find a nice kethane deposit on a flat ridge near the equator, which is exactly what we wanted. So we're going to set this miner down right there in the flat plains of Minimus. I was hoping for one on an ice lake, but it appears that kethane does not really naturally occur on ice lakes anywhere, which is disappointing. Also disappointing that this landing patch is not quite near the equator. It's not really as equatorial as I'd like it to be. It's a little bit up, but it should still be easy enough to get spaceships here. Now, I have discovered that the way my landing gear is set up, it's blocking my engines. I didn't know that having my landing gear extended would block the thrust from these engines, which was a little dumb of me. But all it means is I need to extend my landing gear right before I hit the ground, which is a little fiddly, but thankfully in the low gravity of Minimus it won't be too much of a problem. So I've killed all of my horizontal speed, and we're now just worrying about our vertical speed. As you can see, our true altitude is quite a bit higher here than it is elsewhere on the planet. But we have powerful enough engines in this low gravity that we've got more than enough thrust to slow ourselves down. Again, I have not yet gotten any of the landing things from MechJeb. This is completely me flying, which I'm getting much better at. I'm surprised how much better I am at landing than I used to be. We're going to see if I'm good enough to redock the fuel things on top of this mining vessel or not. I might have to invent something that can dock on that will give me side ports or something that rovers can latch onto later on. Now we kill almost all of our speed, get ourselves down to 1 meter a second, and extend our landing legs, which is going to block all thrust and just set us down. It was a little bouncier of a landing than I'd like, and I can't tell where we are on this map, because the Keythane overlay is too far above the surface, and it won't tell me where the ship is exactly. It's very difficult to tell where it thinks the ship is, but after doing a little test dig with the drill, it appears there's no Keythane here. Examining the map, we have landed very slightly north of the Keythane fields, I think, because I can't tell where it thinks the spaceship is. But I know there's a large patch of Keythane to the south, so I'm going to have to burn this thing right back to the south. Now thankfully the gravity's low enough that I can lower the legs without too much trouble, without any risk of really breaking the ship. And now we just have to move it, and I do have, I've got a huge amount of fuel left, but it looks like it's not that much because I've used so much of my initial fuel. So I don't want to try to move it too far, but this shouldn't be too bad of a little hop. We got to move exactly south. I was seeing if I could get an XY coordinate for the, or minutes and whatever coordinate, whatever they use to measure coordinates on this planet. I was seeing if I could get a coordinate for the ship, but it doesn't appear to give me one, just for the, only a coordinate for the Keythane. But we're just going to keep moving south until we find a spot. So we're setting down here. I got more lateral velocity than I'd like, but don't bounce quite as much, and we set down pretty nicely here. Now doing another little test drill, and we have hit Keythane. We're now mining Keythane on the surface. We also have a small glitch with the monopropellant indicator on top that I can't get rid of, and I don't know why, but we'll deal with that later on. So now we deploy all of our drills and start mining Keythane at full force. And I was worried about the solar panels, but since we don't have to move, I can jettison these engines and free up light getting to our solar panels. Since they're completely covering the outside of the ship, we seem to have enough light coming in. Unfortunately, I can't move this anymore, but I don't think that the Keythane will ever run out unless they've changed the mod. I don't think I can exhaust the Keythane in an area. Which makes a bit of sense, like just mining for one ship at a time shouldn't exhaust things too fast. So filling up our Keythane tank, and then I'm going to activate our Keythane converter here, which should be able to make oxidizer and liquid fuel. I'm not sure if I set it up well enough to be able to make monopropellant. I didn't think of that until later, but I think it might have to be physically connected to the tank that it's feeding into in order to make monopropellant, so I might have to send up something else that can convert to monopropellant later on. But monopropellant isn't as big of a issue as our normal liquid fuel and oxidizer. So now with that beautiful sunset coming in over Minimus, we're going to be able to set up some very interesting missions later on that hopefully use this refueling station. I'm going to put a space station into orbit that I can just keep fully fueled for passing ships, so we don't have to keep setting down or using the probe up and down. Hopefully we'll just use the probe to ferry fuel between the mining station and the space station, and have a nice little refueling dock up in orbit. But that's all going to be happening next episode. For this episode, I'm just going to leave you with this beautiful sunset. And I'm going to say that I'm Gap1. I really hope you enjoy these. More Kerbal to come. I'm also doing way more games on the channel. So check out my other stuff if you're interested. Subscribe, like, share, etc. And if you only like the Kerbal stuff, there is more Kerbal stuff coming. So you can keep an eye out for that as well. As I said, I'm Gap1. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.